I opened my mouth wide. What the hell are you talking about? The Duke's words sounded like he was allowed to shoot people. Father, what does that mean? I stuttered and carefully asked if I understood. Then the peacock kicked his tongue loudly. Don't try to blot out like a fool in front of everyone else's eyes as before. They'll lose memory after they faint anyway, so don't just leave a witness who said you shot them. Do you understand? He seemed to be trying to appease his immature daughter, who was about to get into an accident. I heard I were banned for a year because you said I'd shoot and kill with a crossbow? But instead of telling me not to do it, he even changed the arrow into a faint bead and cast a spell that makes people lose the memory. My God, the Duke is so powerful. Or should I say he thought that Penelope, who has reached a point where he can't control her that much, is great. Why aren't you answering me? The Duke looked at me, who was silent vaguely. Yes, I mumbled back in a dazed mood. I couldn't bear to say that I wouldn't hunt people and stay calm. The participation in the hunting competition I wanted to avoid has been confirmed. Okay, Father, I'll use it well. I'm all right if you get it. When he answered again in a sullen manner, the Duke coughed his words. I was trying to give it to you after hearing the whole story from your side, not to scold you. It was an unexpected consolation. I opened my eyes wide and looked at the Duke. If you understand, let's stop here, go up to your room. We've had a long conversation. He smiled a little awkwardly and hurriedly arranged his seat, as he himself didn't know how to say such a thing. He ordered the maid to bring the crossbow to my room without a break. I hesitated for a moment, looking at the table that had become neat in an instant. The Duke looked at me with a puzzled look, still sitting. I don't know, I'll give you what I brought. I have something for you too, Father. I plucked out what I had roughly covered next to my skirt. It was a box wrapped in luxurious velvet, contrary to what was given to Emily. I opened it and carefully stuck it out before the Duke. A brilliant silver lining embroidered the Duke's big eyes. He was very surprised at the sudden gift. Isn't this amulet? It's engraved with an order that activates emergency teleport magic. This, why are you as expected? The Duke's reaction was like that he had never received a flower in the garden from his youngest daughter. I shook my head to the foolish Penelope and explained in a gentle voice. These days it's the most exchanged gift among the nobles who attend hunting competitions, Father. Gift, yes, I heard that this hunt will involve guests from other countries and release the rare animals they brought. Yes, that's right. Just in case, I want you to keep it with you throughout the competition. Who dares to attack me in this empire? There no one dare to attack, but we don't know what kind of forces will approach Eckhart's political position. In my reply, the Duke looked at me as if he were looking at a strange creature he had never seen before. The silver-colored colorful amulet I gave him was engraved with an emergency teleport order, so the price was quite high. In fact, actually, I was thinking about the one with the defense order engraved on it, but this one was better. It was Eckhart who did not participate in the war, claiming to be a neutral faction. But if you kill or attack a duke, even Eckhart will be turned into an enemy and war will recur, so no one will do such a stupid thing. But you can kidnap him and threaten him. If something unfortunate happens to my father's, I'm sure there will be forces trying to get him into factional strife. Yes, you have such a brilliant idea, the Duke muttered as if he had been shocked, and then he looked at me and said, No. Well, yes. I'll keep it with me. He replied with a puzzled look, like me who just received a crossbow with a magic that makes the person who was hit lose his memory. It seemed totally unexpected that he would receive such a meaningful gift from her reckless foster daughter. Then I'll go up. Originally it was a gift that was brought to avoid his anger. It was given regardless of the purpose, but the gift delivery ceremony was over anyway. My heart was itchy for no reason, so I shook off my seat and quickly got up to the door. It was then. Penelope. Suddenly I heard a low call from behind me. Yes, Father. You've become quite mature these days. The Duke stared at me with an unknown look and said a word. It was a nice compliment, but somehow the words choked me. I didn't know why. Just at that moment my mouth moved. After a long time the Duke's blue eyes were slowly growing. I can't say I've never resented. But is this for poor Penelope? Or I've never felt ungrateful for bringing me here. Am I saying this because I'm miserable, because I'm not even treated like an immature fool like Penelope? It was that moment. Improved relations with Duke Eckhart have increased its reputation by +15. Either way, I felt like crying a little bit. The hunting competition is just a few days away. I called in a butler in the morning to get a blunt wooden bolt for practice. This is because expensive marbles with double magic could not be consumed for practice. Lady, in this the butler didn't go out immediately after handing me a bunch of bolts. He hesitated and gave me a paper bag. What is it, I wondered? This is because after the successful meeting with the winter, I have ordered the butler to burn all the invitations that's sent to me. It was a letter from the palace, so I couldn't take care of it. Palace? The butler's words wriggled my facial muscles. What reason is there to send me a letter from the palace? The golden wax engraved with the yellow dragon looked ominous. I don't want to read it. But I had to read it to prepare myself. With a deep sigh, I opened the envelope with a paper knife. And I took out the contents and started to read them. Dear Princess Penelope Eckhart, several months have already passed since the meeting in the maze garden. In the meantime, every time there was a big or small banquet in the palace, I told them to send an invitation to the princess, but princess never participated. Are you still stuck with the iron poison? Fortunately, the hunting competition is coming up soon, so I will be able to meet you again soon. Princess must have heard that the woman entry ban has been lifted, right? I raised my voice and agreed for my sick princess. So I hope you get well soon and meet me during the day. You didn't forget the promise you made with me, did you? You'd better remember, princess. I've been looking forward to your answer to me, and I've been patient for a long time to get better with that damn iron poison. Callisto Legolas. Crazy. After reading the scrawled signature in strong cursive handwriting, I crumpled the paper I was holding, shaking my teeth. Why haven't you forgotten yet? I shuddered at the stubbornness of the crown prince. I couldn't understand why I was possessed by a love simulation game, and should be receiving threatening letters, let alone dating. Miss? The butler looked surprised at me. What kind of letter is that? Yes, a threatening letter from a man who has nothing to do. Butler. I chewed the voice up and bit it. When is the training time for today's nights? I know it's until 6 p.m., but why do you ask that? Originally I was going to shoot it once or twice when I had time. It was to gauge the level of vitality of the body, to what extent it made the fuss last year. But I changed my mind. I'm going to use the field today. There is a reason why I desperately need to deal with the crossbow. After confirming that there was no evening training from the butler, I looked at the book and waited for the sunset. Phew, I'm possessed in a game, and I'm practicing shooting a crossbow that doesn't exist anywhere else. It was annoying and unfair, but there was nothing I could do. Having received a threatening letter from the Crown Prince, I need to know how to defend myself for my own life. The good news is that I've got a very good product. I won't shoot women who get my nerves like what the dukes worry about, but I'll shoot men who trying to kill me and knock them out. Especially the most dangerous and most demanding prince. If I shot him wrong, I'll be a dead ending because I'll be a royal prisoner. But fortunately the iron ball bursts, and the impact rises, so there is no evidence left, and even the right memory is lost. Perfect. I stood up and clapped, imagining the skeleton of a prince who fainted with a bubble. This is a defensive measure. It's never a mixture of personal feelings. I tried so hard to justify myself. After a while the sun sank out of the window. I changed into my hunting costume and got ready to go out. The aristocratic women of the Inca Empire had no separate clothing because they rarely hunt. So I wore a pair of tight tights and suspenders. After wearing a leather vest and tie, I stood in front of the mirror. I thought it would be ridiculous to wear men's clothes, but when I saw the reflection in the mirror it completely disappeared. Wow, it looks great on you. Indeed, crazy looks were not entirely dependent on costumes. I looked like a female warrior who was used to hunting like goddess Artemis when I even put head together and turned it up. I smiled and even took out the crossbow. I thought it was heavy on the outside, but I was surprised by the light magic. At this time a year ago Penelope used it often. But the sense of grip was not low, as if I were really familiar with it. After finishing the final inspection I left the room with a bundle of arrows. Every employee I meet today took a breath and looked down. Every time I walked in the hallway I was nilcarly caught in the eyes. My figure with the crossbow and arrows seemed quite hideous. I'm going to have to carry it and walk around often when I going stride. Thanks to it, I was able to get out of the mansion safely without a distraction. The road to the field was calm and silent. It's no wonder that they deliberately set the time for all the articles disappeared. But the idea was soon shattered by a figure walking from the other side. The sunset-colored pink hair was unusually red, to the point where it looks almost like my hair color. However, I tried to turn around in a hurry because I recognized the 17% favorability written above his hair color first. But at that moment our eyes met. I stopped with a thud. I'm doomed. I was deeply sighed that I had somehow come to face each other in a vague way. I can't believe I bumped into you, the number one target to avoid. How could I be so unlucky? What should I do? It was ridiculous that I fought with his teeth exposed just a while ago, and now I'm greeting the guy, Leonard. But isn't it also funny to turn around in an eye contact situation? So I just brazenly decided to go head to head. What are you going to do? If I had any shame, I'll ignore you, but Leonard was much more shameless than I thought. For the first hunt you look like a country bumpkin. Just as I was about to pass by, he was sarcastic. Are you going to embarrass yourself going to the field with that shit? I looked around quickly first. Fortunately, there was no stone in sight to fall and hit my head. So I just tried to ignore it, but now you've decided to ignore what I'm saying. I couldn't go further by a quick front blocker. I raised my head with a low sigh. Do you have something to say? In my question, Leonard looked at me with a look that seemed to have a lot to say. Okay. Let's hear what else is going on this time. I looked at him and waited for him to speak. But he just stared at me and said nothing. If you have nothing to say, then don't talk to me. I tried to pass him again, only then did Leonard hurriedly open his mouth. The training isn't over yet. I've been training late for a few days, so if you go now, you'll run into the knights. I didn't want to talk to him anymore, but I'm in trouble, as I was told. Come to think of it, the news that I had an argument with the knights has already reached his ears. But what's the matter? If there should be a void to they'll the one should avoid me. I gave a lukewarm reply. I don't care, I've got at least a target to use. If you done talking, then I'm going. And just as I was about to pass him by. If you want to go up to the attic, go up. An unexpected remark caught my ankle. I don't care if you go or not now. I was just listening to what he was saying, and suddenly I burst out laughing. You sound like you're doing a charity. Penelope might be attached to the attic, but I wasn't. How do we know if I'll get interrogated about making a wish while climbing up and seeing if it's a fire or not? I answered right away without thinking twice. No, why? Because I don't want to bump into you. The blue pupils became bigger, the white letters on his head blinked. He looked at the series of processes with an expressionless look. Favorability 17%. It wouldn't make much difference even if it dropped by 1 or 2% at this rate. I focused more on the less finished training story he told me than on his flirtation. So is Eccles still here? My plans to raise Eccles's favorability a lot during the hunt have failed, so I'll put it up before I go. It was then Leonard's lips, which had been hesitating for a long time, barely opened. At that time I did. What? I was distracted by other thoughts and missed what he said. When I looked back at him and asked him again, he snapped his lips. I've been talking a little bit. Nevertheless, I couldn't understand what Leonard said. Because he mumbled in a rumbling voice, but I had a hunch what he was going to say to me. If you're going to apologize, you have to do it like a real man. Kicking my tongue inside, I bit back. What? Did it? I can't hear anything you said. When I looked at it, I noticed a shy tone. I knew this was my bad idea, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I had been getting from him. It was that moment. I'm sorry I was a little harsh at that time. Leonard suddenly raised his head and shouted. I heard a startled bird flying from across the bushes. Did you eat a boiled train pot? I frowned, touching my prickly ears. Then he grumbled with a red face. Other times I came here first and talked to you, but why are you getting so long this time? Anyway, girls, I gazed at such Leonard. It was just a grumble, but the relationship between him and Penelope seemed to be evident. If it had been a normal game route, how would it have progressed here? I'll have to accept Ronald's apology, and thank you for apologizing first. But well, why do I have to say something I don't even like to say thank you every time? Leonard, at my call, he gave me a rude answer, glaring at me. What's your apology? I accept. I didn't do anything good either. I'm glad to know. Perhaps it hurt his pride to apologize first, and Leonard's crumpled face straightened out. As if it was only natural for me to accept an apology. But you know what? It's the first apologize I've ever received from you. I'm not going to thank you for the red-handed apology. You've slashed me with your tongue countless times, and I've forgiven you countless times without your apology. I mean, I'll forgive you again this time. Instead, he smiled brightly. I laughed so hard that you didn't apologize, but you thought I was just accepting you. Due to the inverted position, the glow of the sunset over the ridge poured over my face this time. Small hairs were scattered in the swirling wind. It was when he raised his eyes again with one hand with his side hair in his ear. Leonard's face looking at me was a little strange. His eyes were confused as if he were out of his mind, and when his eyes met, the redness was spreading from the bottom of his eyes. Yes, he stammered with an instant red-hot face. I don't need any forgiveness from you. I've said everything I need to say, so I'm going. And he turned around and disappeared like a shot without a moment to answer. What's wrong? Left on the forest path, I frowned at the back of the man who was going away. At that moment the top of his head was shining big. Favorability 22%. I had to check several times to see if it was right, until the white writing that was getting smaller and smaller was completely gone. Leonard was right. When I arrived at the training field, the atmosphere was chaotic, as if the swordsmanship training had just ended. Fortunately, there was no archery training, but the target site, which was far from the training field, was empty. I trudged around the field to avoid the crowds of knights. It would be faster to cross, but it was only a short time ago that I had a face-to-face encounter with the Duke. For the time being, it was better to stay calm without causing more trouble. Finally, standing in front of the target, I mounted an arrow on the crossbow and pulled the protest to hang it on the hook. Then I turned the crank and posed. I believed in the owner of this body who used the crossbow for a year. What's wrong with it? But I also felt that the end of the bow toward the target was unstable. When I was just standing there, I felt light, but when I aimed at something, my arms trembled because it was heavier than I thought. Didn't she actually shoot? I couldn't stand it, and dropped my arm again to vent my complaint. I can barely load it, but I have no idea how to hold it and shoot it. After shaking my wrists, I raised the crossbow again. This time I was going to shoot you quickly before my arms shake. If you hold it like that, you can't aim. Suddenly I felt warmth behind my back. At the same time, a gently hand stretched out to support the stone arm which was trembling in the air. I tried to turn around in a fit of surprise. Master. However, it was thwarted by a solid body that touched my back. Eccles, it was only then that I realized that I was completely trapped in another person's arms. What is this? You have to look ahead, master. Embarrassed, I wriggled in my arms and Eccles whispered in my ear. The prey is going to run away. I stopped moving at his voice. My back was completely on Eccles's chest. For some reason my mouth dried up and I swallowed a dry saliva. Let go of your left hand, hold the trigger with your right hand and hold it close to your chest. He gently moved his right hand, which had been supported the crossbow, and held it on top of mine. The back of my hand was covered with hot heat in an instant. But more so than that, the neck of his breath was on my neck. Put your left hand under Tillerson, now look at the target. This time his left hand first wrapped around my hand and moved smoothly. With his help I take my position again, and the pose is much more stable. Breathe, master. I heard a shallow laugh in my ear. By the time I felt that the red spot on the target seen beyond Tillerson was suddenly ascribed, the trigger was pulled. When I came to my senses, I found an arrow in the center of the target. Good job. The overlapping warmth swept down the back of my hand. The hard arm that had been locked up in a tight way went down. At the next moment, Eccles, who was close behind my back, fell neatly and stepped aside. But still the back of my hand was as hot and stuffy as it was covered in something. I took a slow breath and lowered the crossbow I was holding. Is the training over? And when he heard face toward me, the unknown tickling had all disappeared. Eklis looked at me with strange eyes and asked, "Since when have you been here?" "Not long ago." "You're not looking for me." It was a tone that seemed to complain why I didn't. "Were you upset?" I smiled briefly because it was funny to hear such a sound with a face as expressionless as well. "You're not supposed to call me during the training because you seemed to hate me. Were you worried?" "Sure, I'm always worried about you." At that moment the tip of his lips flinched a little and favorability 44%. The soaring favorability made me feel alright. I could feel my smile hanging around my mouth getting stronger than before. "Now it's quite obvious. Do you like the new training suits you bought?" Clearly Eklis's old grubby looks disappeared and he was very cute. At my question he gave a slight nod. "That's a relief." I turned away from him with a slight murmur. Even if he didn't like it, I didn't care. "I've done enough for you." I picked up the crossbow again. This time I posed as he held me. It was much more stable than when I got my own way, but it still wasn't easy to get an accurate aim. Perhaps because of the poor arm muscles, my arm quickly fell asleep again. "You can help me again?" After seeing me whimpering, the slave master, who had no clue, suddenly asked while watching me. "Is it because of the hunting contest?" I couldn't stand it in the end and nodded, lowering the crossbow again. "Yes." Then he breathed shallowly and muttered, "I'll win first place and make you happy with the prize money." Of course, I didn't really have anything to do with first place. It was a whole practice for my life. But the sound of the wind blowing quietly came back. I glanced back at him. Eklis was still expressionless face, but a faint smile shone on his pupils. I was a little puzzled, perhaps because I had never seen him smile properly. "Are you laughing?" He shook his head with excitement when I asked. "It's hard for the master to shoot the crossbow well." "Why, it's too—" He lowered his eyes and mumbled something in a small voice. "I can't hear you." "Small, what do you do?" he asked back, but the other answer came back. "If you don't get the right posture, it's going to be hard to stand up for a rebound. If you do this, your wrist may be strained and your bone may crack." Really, it's a catchy word. If it's like that, it's good. Then I wouldn't be able to participate in a fucking hunting competition. Without realizing it, my heart flowed out. Then when I saw Eklis's eyes were round, I hurriedly turned back. "But how do you know so well about the crossbow?" At this time of the year, Eklis certainly didn't learn martial arts formally. However, it was strange that Wallman was quite skilled at handling it. In Delman, he paused while answering my question, then he corrected his words again. "In my hometown, I learned my bow as a basic skill." Eklis's native name was Delman. It's information that didn't even come out of the game, so I put it in my head. What's interesting is that he who will later become the sword master learned the bow before the sword. "Not a sword?" "Yes, I see," I added with a nod. "That's great, then you can get me in position so I can win first place." He shut his mouth for a moment, and a long time later I asked back in a slightly murky voice. "Just like before?" "Yes," as if he didn't know anything. His head blinked when he answered back. "And favorability 49%, yeah, that's it." I grinned at the rising favorability. "I'm glad 100 times I've come to the field." Eklis, who had been hesitating for a while, immediately came up behind me and stood close. An arm wrapped around me on both sides. It was about the time when the hand that stretched out from behind overlapped over the back of my hand and raised the crossbow to aim. "Now what are you doing?" Suddenly a frosty voice fell from the left. At that moment the body swished violently. It wasn't my will, but it was his other intention because it was Eklis's moves. Feeling the spirit of others, he turned almost reflexively and aimed the crossbow at the uninvited guest. In my arms. In an instant I could see a stiff black-haired man in a reverse view. The little Duke? I was very embarrassed. Why is he here? Except for Leonard and Derek's combination, meeting with two male players at the same time was a rare occurrence in the game. In the midst of a flurry of unexpected developments, he recited in a lower voice. Penelope Eckhart. A cold chill swept over the back of the neck. It's not very good. Whatever it was, I had to break this situation down quickly. I hurried out of Eklis's arms, however the hot palms that lay on the back of the hand did not budge at all the time. "Eklis?" I twisted my wrists again, calling him. But the more I struggled, the stronger the power of clamping down. "Eklis, let go of your hand because it hurts." I finally tilted my head to the top and looked up at him. The gray eyes rolled toward me. After meeting my eyes for a moment, he finally loosened his grip on me. The hands that fell off were cooler than before. I hurried out of his arms and paid a silent tribute to Derek. "What are you doing?" But the only thing that came back was the cold gaze. Why is he so angry? Not long ago he finished his work with the Knights well with the Duke. A few days later Derek didn't say much, and then I didn't do anything to be blamed. I answered obediently, tilting my head against Derek's bad spirits. I was practicing the crossbow with my escort. The archers of the family are obviously left behind. The cold gaze went beyond me to Eccles behind me. "You can't bully soldiers in training," I added, shuffling in front of Eccles as if I were protecting him from Derek. And my escort knew about the crossbow well enough to teach me. "To teach you?" I saw a blue spark splashing in his eyes as to what had hurt his sarcasm. His head began to blink dangerously, but I felt more scared of his face, which was turning violent, than his favorability gauge. Derek looked alternately at me and Eccles with a contemptuous tone. "You don't have the basic common sense to point you bow to your peers. What can you learn?" "I don't have any common sense, so I'm just trying to learn a little bit before I go to the competition, little Duke. I don't feel much of a blow because I didn't do what I did, but I couldn't help but sighing at the sharp response. If you don't like me using the field, I'll go somewhere. Let's go, Eccles." I took Eccles and tried to hurry out of my seat. I was about to pass Derek, where I could not move further by the grasping grip of my arm. Looking back with astonished eyes, he was covered with a blue face. "I'll teach you myself if you need such instruction." "Yes, you." He suddenly turned away from me and looked at Eccles. "If you don't have any further training, then go back to your quarters." I couldn't say anything about Derek's haughtily giving orders. No matter how much I said I'd bring him and make him my escort, but thanks to the tacit permission of Derek, the leader Eccles was able to participate in the training anyway. As with any army, the Knights of Eckhart were very thorough in their top and bottom. So I thought he'd go back to his quarters. But instead of leaving, Eccles gently wrapped around my wrist, holding a crossbow opposite of hand Derek's caught. "My master wants me to teach her." And he answered with a crooked tilt of his head. "What's wrong with them?" In a situation where my hands were held together, I just looked at them with shaky eyes. Derek's face turned violent when he saw the rebellious Eccles. Who dares teach whom on the subject of slavery? The Imperial Army also suffered a devastating defeat in the Battle of Levius by Delman's court-martial. I opened my mouth at Eccles's direct reply. This was a clear check. From some point on I felt a sting in my skin. I didn't know who it was coming from. "I'd like you to let it go." I tried, twisting both wrists, but neither of them budged. Delman Derek, who was staring at Eccles without saying a word, suddenly laughed at one corner of his mouth. A country of shallow savages that was betrayed by the small countries that had been deviant and erased from the map without a break? Soon Eccles's grip at my wrist was tightened. "You're going to get into a fight." I looked at the two men in a whirlwind of eyes, unable to groan. Frankly speaking, I had a big wish that Eccles would stop saying anything. In any case, there is a huge difference in status with Derek in the Empire. But contrary to my earnest wish, Eccles opened his mouth, glaring at Derek. "Then let's take a look at it today. How that shallow savage teaches the only princess of the Empire how to hold a bow." "You cocky little..." Derek's face was horribly distorted in a sarcastic tone. Their heads began to blink dangerously. Anxiety crept up over my body. If it's one of the episodes that they're fighting at this rate, I'm sure I'm the only one who gets swept away. I was holding my breath to see if my back would burst if I stepped out for no reason, but I couldn't. "Stop, stop," I shouted loudly, shaking off the wrists held by the two as hard as I could. I was able to retrieve my wrist safely thanks to the carelessness of those who were staring at each other with a ready-to-fight spirit. I put my hands together in front of my chest just in case I get caught again. "I'm off. I suddenly don't want to practice." Then I turned to Derek first, and then hurriedly notified him. "I have to get out of here right now." I left them alone and tried to get out of the targets. Perhaps embarrassed by my behavior, the two immediately tried to catch me. "Penelope, master." Even Eccles, who seemed unlikely, came close as if he were racing. I narrowed the gap between my eyes and beat him coldly. "Don't follow me." I'm going back to my room alone. I think I told Eccles, but it was actually meant for Derek. He may follow me to the mansion. If you're going to fight, get out of here and just goodbye then. I hurried out of the field in case two people chased me. I could feel the stinging eyes on the back of my head. The faster the walk got away from them, the more I ran. My gosh, just entering the forest road, I breathed softly and glanced behind me. Fortunately, no one was following me, only then did I slow down my speed. I almost died in it for nothing. Anxiety is always right. The chill I felt earlier came back to me and my body trembled. In the midst of that chaos, I muttered helplessly, laughing at the way I had brought the crossbow. But I'm glad I ran away. Well, it was not known whether the two lost and started to fight. Even so, it didn't matter now. I think I'm not going to lose my favor because I'm not even in the right place. I'm just going to ask the Duke to have a separate archery teacher, so I'm going to practice alone in the backyard. I started walking again, vowing many times not to approach the Secretary of State for the time being. The damn hunting contest is just a day away. I was awakened by maids from the dawn of the day and forced to get rid of the dirt and polish. It was because of the Eve festival held at the hunting ground inside the palace. This time it was going to be even larger than other times because a large number of royalty and aristocrats from other countries also participated. Secondly, pickled in flavor oil, I complained with sleepy eyes, leaving my wet hair in the hands of the maids. Why do I have to do this? I'm going to tie my hair up and wear pants when I hunt tomorrow anyway. So you should dress up more beautifully than anyone else today and get the most prey from men. Emily responded briskly. Then the maids who had stormed into my room since morning responded. Sure, miss. This time you will be the queen of the hunting festival. That's right, last year Lady Kellen won the first prize in the case, and her kids were so proud of her. Finally, the chattering maid suddenly shut her mouth. Emily's glance at the maid reflected in the mirror. The atmosphere in the room quickly subsided. Now that she has spoken of her master's dark history, she seemed afraid that she might lose heart from me. Well, I'm not the one did it. I generously passed the maid's slip of the tongue, and thought about the hunting competition they were looking forward to. It didn't come out in detail in normal mode, but the hunting competition here was open to all regardless of gender. On the last day there was something unusual about selecting the winner by the final number of game. Even if you don't hunt yourself, you can win the first prize if you have a lot of people. Of course, hard-to-catch prey such as bears and tigers were scored separately. Therefore many men would hunt hard and offer their prey to give the woman they liked the honor of winning. It was a kind of courtship. While hunting competition is just like a women's game. Are you a manito of love or what? Countess Kellen won the hunt last year. It was thanks to Penelope, who had a hard time with her. The man in attendance drove the game away because of the sympathy that she almost got hit by the Duke's mad dog, or the chimpanzee's crossbow. I think that's what the Duke used to tease do with. Sadly, I was not interested in anything but protecting my life. At that time one head was pulled. Thanks to it I was awakened from my thoughts. Are you hurt, miss? I'm sorry. A maid was fixing it by holding my dry hair up. At my brief groan she hurriedly let go of her hand and stepped. That's enough, go on, I nodded and urged and muttered to myself like I was talking to myself. Don't worry too much, everyone, I have an idea too. What? I'll catch it when I get a chance. The sudden words puzzled the maids' faces. What, miss? The woman who has the most prey if you watch it in moderation and shoot the woman on the last day with a crossbow and take away the prey. Lady, it was a joke to lighten up the mood, but the maids' faces turned black at once. Emily panicked and hurried back to the topic. Please don't say such a horrible thing now. It's all over now. All you have to do is put on makeup. You've got a long way to go, I mumbled in a lump but closed my eyes gently as they told me. Being pretty is a good thing anyway, so the early morning makeup didn't end until late afternoon. I wore a set of white pearl accessories chosen by the maids and a red dress like blood with deep clavicle. As expected, this look suited this face. Evil things were bound to be beautiful. The image of Penelope reflected in the mirror was dangerously fascinating, as it was set as an image intentionally opposite to that of the normal mode. The big tail of the eyes, slightly raised like a cat, is strangely colorful. Red and covetous more than anything on the surface, but actually like an apple full of poison. The maids brought black enamel shoes to match the dress. I couldn't get used to wearing high heels after a long time. As I staggered, Emily quickly grabbed me and asked, "Do you want me to help you to the first floor, lady?" "No, bring Eccles in." "What? Why is he?" As if wondering, Emily asked back. I responded lightly, "Of course he's going to escort me." "Well, yes, then wait a minute, miss, I'll call him now." Emily hurried out, nodding her head with a quivering face. I understood her doing so because slaves cannot enter the palace. But the reason for calling him wasn't actually because of the escort, to see if Derek and him really had a fight after I went. And I'm also, now that I've been carefully dressed, it's time to raise his favorability. Soon after, the door opened with a knock. "Lady, I've got your escort. Come in." Following Emily, Eccles entered the room. "Master." He suddenly stopped walking when his eyes met with me, who was looking at him in a drowsy position with my chin on the table. The gray eyes shook violently once it was clear that it was because of my appearance, dressed up to the most favorability 50% unlike before. I immediately smiled with a slight rise in favor. "Emily, you need to go down first with my crossbow case." "Are you going to take it today?" "I thought I'd better put it in cabana in advance." "Yes, I will, miss." After a while she left the room with the crossbow case. "Come closer, Eccles." I tapped a few fingers on the table. Stiff with a blank face, he managed to pull himself together and walked slowly toward me. Eccles stopped with a few steps left from the table, closer. Once again, as he lifted his head, he narrowed the distance without a word and came close to me. "Kneel down." Despite a rather abrupt and coercive order, Eccles boiled his knees before me without delay. I reached out my hand and gently wrapped it around his chin. I didn't even bump into Derek a few days ago, so I needed to check in detail. Fortunately, there were no scratches on the smooth skin. "Are you hurt anywhere?" Contrary to the rude touch of turning my chin around, I asked in a gentle manner. "Because you can see the face, you can swoop over and pat yourself." Eccles, who looked at me, still nodded slightly when I finally stopped moving. "You didn't fight, I guess." The master left, and then the leader left. As soon as he noticed what I was curious about, he gently confessed what happened afterwards. "Were you worried?" It was the same question as before. Then I gladly answered yes, perhaps I liked it quite a bit. But the gray eyes stared blankly at me. The look seemed to force me to answer yes immediately. But when he showed unexpected hostility, my heart was pounding, so I picked up a whip instead of a carrot. "From now on, don't be so reckless." A harsh voice came out as if to scold the dog for committing a mistake. "You said you could do it, but you want to be kicked out before you're even admitted to stay here." "He's the first one who—" "What do you mean, him?" I warned coldly, raising the hand that was holding his chin. "The first brother is the one who will let you pass. Do he look as generous as I am to you?" Eccles's eyes, which were refuting as if they were unfair, dropped a little. An expressionless face was the same as usual, but a subtly sullen face somewhere. Of course it may be an illusion. I looked at the white writing clearly floating on his head and said in a relaxed, soft voice, "I want you to stay with me for a long time. Eccles should not be kicked out of the dukedom until his favorability is complete, so I can escape. Then you'll have to exclude him from your personal hostility. It means don't vent your resentment toward the Empire on him. It wasn't just that Derek and Eccles might die in the struggle. How that shallow savage teaches the only princess of the Empire how to hold a bow." As soon as I heard Eccles say so, I suddenly remembered clearly the memory of a rainy day. He who wields a wooden sword in the air, as if to kill anyone, and his sword which was pushed close next to my neck. Eccles seemed to be in awe of me for bringing him in and taking care of him, but at the same time vehemently loathed that I was being rolled into the clutches of the Empire. For a successful escape, Eccles should not continue to harbor such a treacherous mind. I have to make sure that I have a whole crush on him, so I needed to remind him once or twice. "Do you hate me for buying you? Do you think an auction house would be better than staying here and being looked down on? I need someone useful to me. If you don't like it, and I'm forcing you, I'll give you this ruby ring. You can leave any time." I always acted as if I'd taken out a ruby ring stuck in my left index finger right away. It was a super stronger. "If he really goes, then you have to change your posture and apologize." But playing normal mode, I knew it well. He accepted Penelope's odd exploits and annoyances, but stayed with the Duke until the end. For there was no place for the slaves of the defeated country to go, nor to feel as peaceful as the dukedom gave him. Master Eccles' pupils shook once as I pulled out the ruby ring and handed it over. As expected, he did not receive the ring. Instead, "I'm sorry." He rubbed his face against his ringed hand and begged, "I'll never be reckless again, Master. I'm sorry. Please forgive me just this once." A big hard ruby clattered over his fluffy skin. I wish I had the ring and had the nerve to stick it up with the iron plate, then I will be free from anxiety about the restraint that I might choke on. But on my cold face Eccles simply fluttered his tail. Is he naive or sly? Looking at him who was filling his neck with his own leash, I put the ring down on the table after he struggled to tear off my rubbed hand. And whimpering and covering his face with empty hands before Eccles' inorganic eyes and eye contact, I asked calmly, from the moment I gave you the sword you're my knight. I'm your only lady, don't forget that fact all the time. He was quick on the wits, so I folded my eyelids gently and smiled so he couldn't tell if I was being empty or serious. The gray eyes toward me at once became hazy. Yes, master favorite, 54%. The favorability has risen sharply. Finally, it's finally over half. I smiled contentedly, and straight down the hand that was holding Eccles's cheeks. Okay, well, now we'll have to do your part as a knight. Then I put the ruby ring I had left on the table back on my index finger, then stuck it out to him. Please escort me to the first floor. Eccles held my hand as always. It was when I came down to the first floor with Eccles's escort. I ran into a grown duke and a butler who were just walking out. Father, on their way to the front door, they found me walking down the stairs and stopped walking. Good afternoon, I smiled and said hello first, but the duke just stared at me and he did not answer after quite a long time. Father? When I called the duke again with a puzzled look, he then coughed and opened his mouth. What's that about your dress? What? I was offended by the way he pointed out, not the answer to greetings. What's wrong with my clothes? It's because I dressed as quiet as I could to avoid splashing after I was possessed, but this was originally Penelope's favorite style. The duke added a sound, kicking his tongue to what was so unpleasant. How can a noblewoman who hasn't even had an adult yet? Good afternoon, miss, you're so beautiful today. Especially the color of the dress you're wearing goes well with pearl earrings. At that time the butler abruptly cut off the duke's words and recited them as expected. He was a brilliant man. Really, I picked it out of consideration, but I'm glad the butler said that. Do I look okay? I smiled like a blooming flower. The butler responded, perfectly, of course I'm blinded. Thanks, butler. Because of butler I'll be able to spend the rest of the day in a good mood. The duke showed discomfort in the pleasant conversation. Now you'll greet me gently again. I snorted, inwardly glancing at the duke secretly. Perhaps he noticed my pledge. The duke turned away. Why are you coming down with him? This time the target of the blow has changed. The eyes of Eccles were not good. I shrugged my shoulders. He's my escort. I asked for an escort to the palace. What escort? It's been a long time since you've been with your family only, so stop passing it on. Your brothers has decided to escort you in person. With family only? Yes, at the answer of the duke, who confirmed the murder, my smiling face hardened. I'm going to be doomed from the start. It was already suffocating to think of the four of us riding a carriage to the palace. It's been a long time not knowing how I felt. The butler clapped his hands and added, but you're wearing high heels today, so it's going to be uncomfortable. Why don't Duke escort you to the carriage? It's a hassle. I'm all right. I tried to refuse with a moderate smile, but the Duke popped out. What are you doing? Don't catch me. I don't have time. Then in less than a second he is waving his hands and pushing back. No, you said it was a hassle. I don't know which rhythm to follow. I was dumbfounded, but I couldn't help it, Eccles. I felt a little sorry to have called him in a long time, so I looked back at him and whispered quietly, Stay well until I come back. Listen to me and I'll make you a prize money. He looked at me with an equivocal face without a particular answer. Then after a while he let go of my hand, which he was holding, with a slight nod. Favorability 55%. It was strange to see the favorability that rose only 1% and the eyes that were nailed to me until the end. Somehow I seemed to be laughed at while I was touching the Duke with my hand. I suddenly thought of it. It was when I had just climbed onto the carriage under the Duke's escort. It had already been after I took one seat inside. Why are you two sitting together? Why are you sitting like that? I was frustrated to see them sitting face to face. The Duke's carriage was spacious enough to leave seats for all four of us. But I had to sit next to one of them inevitably for coming out late. I looked at the two alternately and agonized for a moment. Favorability 22%, favorability 25%. Strangely enough, Derek's favorability, which was 20% until recently, rose 5%. Is it because of the aftermath of the crossbow practice? It seems that running away without taking Eccles's side was a boost. In addition, Leonard unexpectedly caught up in favor a 3% difference. Just sit up quickly. My troubles were not long at the Duke's urging. I quickly sat next to Derek. Apart from feeling sorry for Leonard, favorability was also a top priority for me. 2 pairs of blue eyes were directed at me in a minute. The faces of the two were subtly different. It was that moment: favorability 1% favorite, 21% favorability plus 2% favorite, 27%. Their favorability has changed at the same time. 1% off was Leonard and 2% up was Derek. Hey, what's with your clothes? Sure enough, by the time I were staring at each other's heads, Leonard started a quarrel as soon as I sat down. I asked back in a sour way, why? A girl who's not even dry in the head has learned bad things. Why don't you just take it off? At the last banquet I thought you were a little old, and you're still the same. Following the sarcastic Leonard, even Derek recited in a disapproving voice. Why are you arguing about nothing? I lowered my head and checked to see if my dress was that serious. But the V-neck only revealed some clavicle, and it wasn't all right either. Stop it! As soon as I opened my mouth to refute the injustice, the Duke climbed onto the carriage. It looks good on her, but why are you so criticize her like that? Are you serious, father? Leonard laughed as if he was dumbfounded by his sudden rise to my head. Of course, so was I, who was the first to hear a criticize from the Duke a while ago. Excuse me. When he looked at the peacock with an amazing look, he turned his head, kicking his tongue. Let's go, and casually knocked on the carriage wall a couple of times. It was not long before the magical carriage left without a sound. As I expected, stifling silence occupied the carriage. So let's go on our own. Why, I sighed, clinging myself close to the window so as not to touch Derek. It seemed to remind me of the nightmare of the past when I had to only look at the window without budging until I arrived at the palace. It was unexpectedly the Duke who broke the silence that had lasted for a while. Didn't you guys get a milestone for the hunt? The sudden noise drew everyone's attention to him. Leonard asked with a puzzled look. What milestone? Well, don't you have anything to offer in hopes of safety? Like this, the peacock Duke with his collar. The eyes of the suns have blossomed over there. I also look at it without much thought and stare at it. That's why amulet. Derek, who had not said a word so far, opened his mouth. I was confused with embarrassment. This is because the silver amulet I gave as a gift a few days ago was stuck proudly on the Duke's chest like a medal. No, why would you? No matter how easy it is to detach and attach. Who puts the talisman on top of his clothes? The arms dealer said. It is more popular for milestone, which can be attached secretly to the body. The Duke, who seemed to boast, was so absurd that I puffed my lips. In addition, that was for a purpose only to be secretly given to the Duke. Of course, there was nothing for Leonard and Derek. But isn't human psychology the case? If I don't get it, of course I'm annoyed and sad if you're going to brag about those in front of these fucking bastards. The Duke, who didn't know how I felt inside, tried to explain with an excited face. That's what I'm saying. A few days ago, Penelope, father, I stopped him in a hurry. The eyes on the Duke glanced toward me. I laughed awkwardly and squeezed out the reason why I called him. Who gave it to you? It really goes well with you, really? The Duke twitched the corners of his mouth, as if he were pleased with my words. I sighed and circumscribed and exhorted, but for safety reasons you didn't attach it to the inside of your clothes. What if someone sees it as bad thing and talks about it? For example, Eckhart's head is a coward who attaches a magic talisman for fear of anyone hurting him in a hunting competition. Leonard spoke spitefully, as if he understood what I had said. I know it would be honorable to hear rumors that you were too old to join government. If they want to gossiping so much about them, just let them be. At the moment, the Duke roared. I'll have to see what wicked man is talking about the lover gift from his only daughter, and I'll have to see them at my day off. A cool silence fell, as if someone had poured cold water into the carriage. I'm screwed. I just laughed out of my mind. Did Penelope give it to you? Derek asked with a lower voice. For some reason I trembles hearing his angry voice. The Duke, who not sensible enough, smiled and raised the drug to the ground. Even you guys should be nice. You're not popular with women because of your personalities. Leonard laughed as if he was in a good mood. That's when Derek, who was silently looking at the Duke, turned to me. An unknown feeling was palpitating in the blue pupil. You to me, he tried to say something in a suppressed voice, but he closed his mouth again and turned his head and Favorability -1%, favorability 26%. Come on, why did I give him the amulet? I was so resentful of the favorability of hard mode which fell so easily. The carriage slowed sharply as it approached the palace. As I glanced out of the window, I could see the carriage of the entrance western sight stretched out. Why is it taking so long? I was curious that at the last banquet it was passed quickly without any strings. It was the Duke who gave me the answer to my own words. It is to check if there are any magic weapons, demons, or wizards. Inspections? Yes, it's a hunting competition hosted by the Crown Prince himself, and if he thinks his life is precious, he'll search it thoroughly. I wondering soon nodded and agreed. The Crown Prince, a war hero, had many enemies not only inside the Empire but also outside. Until he ascend to the throne, he will probably face constant checks and threats of life. I'm sure he'll break his personality. I was convinced of his crazy personality. However, I was never sympathetic. I felt the most sorry for myself here. But if you're also checking if it's a wizard, can't even Winter get in? Not long after the Duke's carriage was at the checkpoint, so the idea didn't last long. Of course we passed easily. Although my crossbow beads were caught in crystal balls that red mana, it was no problem because they were obviously for hunting. The palace wizard checked and returned my crossbow case to Emily in another carriage. What else are you going to do this time? You've prepared a lot. Looking at it over the window, Leonard was sarcastic. Derek also gave me a light sigh, shedding a piteous look as if he sympathized with me. The Duke, who had prepared it with his own hand, let out a dry cough, as if he were at ease, and I felt guilty again. The eve of the festival was a spacious garden just a short distance from the hunting ground forest. Indeed, the royal palace was well decorated even though it was outdoors. Fine fabrics and ribbons decorated to further enhance the beauty of the flowers and garden. The colorful lights on the wall of a tall bush that secretly surrounds the banquet hall so that you can't peek inside. As many people had already arrived, the servants were busy wandering between round tables prepared for each family. Upon arrival, the Duke and the two brothers went to inspect the cabanas and horses to use for the hunt. Because of that, I had no choice but to enter the garden alone with Emily behind me. Where is he? Hasn't he come yet? I wandered among numerous aristocrats and looked around frantically. It was to find out the location of the Crown Prince first. My heart fluttered for no reason because I didn't know where he would pop out. Maybe I should have followed the other family and come here together. He's a madman, but he won't try to kill me where all the operatives are. I was disappointed with my belated regrets. I began to hear mugwort which suddenly irritated my ears. Shameless, no matter how much the participation ban has been lifted, she still don't know where this place is and where the daylight is coming in. That's what I'm saying. How can Prince Eckhart order his children to? Ma'am, don't say that. Where is the heavenly heavens going to be educated? Whoever heard it was a sound of swearing at me. I frowned and looked for the source. But I couldn't find it because everyone in the garden was staring at me. Well, it's understandable since last year's superstar appeared. I thought so, but I couldn't help being annoyed by the insult. I realized earlier that I was not in a position to understand or convinced how the prince's personality was destroyed in a calm manner. Penelope also had enemies both inside and outside, therefore there is a reason why she has come to the path of the wave. If you look at that vulgar dress, she didn't even ashamed for being lady who hasn't reached adult yet. Emily's face was sullen when she decided on a dress to show off Penelope's beauty with the maids. I was already being reprimanded for my clothes for the 4th time today. I heard that if you put up with it 3 times you'll avoid murder. Now that it's been over 3 times, can we make a fuss? Emily, I sang the maid in a low voice that everyone could hear. Go get my crossbow. Emily's eyes shook once. Yes, miss, I'll get it right away, but soon she answered much more loudly than I did before turning around. Please don't make such a terrible sound out of your mouth any time when you writhe. When I saw her disappearing toward the side of the cabana, I laughed. Unlike a little while ago, when the chatter was rampant, the hall quickly became quiet. Just one more word. I raised my chin haughtily and glanced around. It was funny to see them turn their head in a hurry after a noticeable flutter in every pupil I encountered. Even the only maid disappeared and was left alone, but no one hastily tried to make fun of her mouth. You don't want to be hit by a crossbow shot by a crazy chimpanzee? I first put off the idea of identifying the location of the Crown Prince. Fortunately, he didn't appear yet. If he were here, he wouldn't be the one to stand by and see myself like this. I moved to the table of the House of Eckhart in front with a little relief, then I flopped into a chair, crossed my legs and sang a passing bell. Hey, yes, bring me a drink, not a glass but a bottle. Finally, when people peeked at the specimen of the rascal in their preconceptions, the sound of resounded everywhere. Madam, some time later Emily came with a crossbow case. How hard she had been running, she gasped as soon as she delivered me the crossbow. Good work, Emily. Emily smiled with a wry face under my face. It was a nasty smile I saw when you woke me up with a needle before. I put the case hard on the table and took out the crossbow, then I began to insert marbles into it as if they wanted. Crack, click, clang, clack, only the sound of iron beads mounted on the crossbow echoed in the tranquil banquet hall. My God, somebody try to stop her. Don't we have to bring in the guards? I heard whispering somewhere. It was when he was turning the crank without caring. What are you doing? Suddenly there was a wind blowing when I looked up. The Duke and his sons were there. Their appearance gave them a noticeable sigh of relief. Around them, you look like you've been waiting a long time. Listening to the chimpanzee. Are you ready to shoot them? Asked Leonard as if he was dumbfounded. Finally loaded, I carried the crossbow around my back and answered him without even looking back. Don't mind, don't you see they're all staring at you? Knowing what else I'm going to be ashamed of because of you. Leonard, the Duke warned the growing voice. Leonard looked around for a moment, and then curled his brain. Do you want to sit in that funny face, you crazy little bitch? The voice of clenched teeth and whispering swear words was eerie. I thought it was ridiculous to see myself surrounded by a magnificent crossbow on a colorful dress. But I didn't answer anything because he wouldn't believe it even if I said it was a measure to protect myself. Penelope Eckhart. There was one more person who looked at me like a crazy bitch. It's the ban that been lifted for a year. You'd better not be rash. It's what my father allowed me to do. I had no choice but to make an excuse that would work best. Leonard asked glaringly. Really, father? The sight of the Duke blaring his eyes gave me a slight prick. Fortunately, he would have kicked his tongue disapprovingly but wouldn't say no. Isn't there any reason not to carry hunting weapons at the banquet hall? Don't be so loud and sit down. But father, this girl already have a clear criminal record. You don't trust your sister that much, she said. He deeply regretted it, so watch over her. And Penelope, you too. The Duke looked back at me and threatened me. If you make a fuss again this time, I'll let you go, whether you're in a palace prison or not. Yes, believe me, father, I grinned. Leonard had a face full of things to say, but in the end he'll shut up and sit on my left. The eyes staring at me, smiling hatefully, were fierce. Oh my God, if you don't like it, just buy all the amulets. Then I was very pleased with the power of amulet, giving them a lot of trouble inside. I'm glad I gave it to the Duke. By the time I was giggling, someone was sitting on the right side of the empty space. I felt it. Be nice to yourself, he turned his head along the cool voice. Before I knew it, Derek, who took my side, recited so low that I'm the only could hear him. If you do another disgrace on the family, it won't end up in jail. As the Duke sat across the street, all the members of the Eckhart family sat down. As a result, I got caught between two male men who hated me. Why? Embarrassed by the unexpected situation, I took turns looking to the side. Why is it left and right? The Crown Prince would not want to kill me because they were on both sides, but I was not happy at all. Not only the crossbow, but also forks, knives, and hunting rapiers worn by men. There are dangerous things all over the place that might kill me like this way. I can't believe the bastards are taking both sides. It's not good from the start. It was when bad foreboding was climbing up the ankles. The Crown Prince is entering. A bad feeling has come to reality. When I turned my eyes to the loud sound, I saw a big new model that walked quickly through the red carpet in the middle. Favorite 2%. The golden hair curled brightly under the dark night sky. I always saw the white letters first, but I had his shiny hair first. I used to stare blankly at shiny blonde hair. He suddenly turned his head to the side as if he had noticed I was about to make eye contact. I leaned down like I was lying on the table. I felt left X right X looking at my journey as if they were wondering, but I couldn't care less. Game Master, please tell me I didn't make eye contact here, please. It was when I was praying to the game that I used to curse at every day. The Emperor has gone south to take care of himself, the prince's voice echoed in the distance. I'm going to hosting this hunt. The opening of the company has begun. Unexpectedly he spoke as decent man. I raised a prone upper body as if nothing had happened. I could see the prince sitting proudly in a golden chair on the podium. And underneath it sat people in strange clothes that seemed to be royalty who had been in another country. The crown prince's gaze fortunately did not reach me. I was relieved. This hunt is attended by VIPs from friendly countries, so it's going to be a more intense battle. There are many unique animals brought from other countries, so enjoy yourselves. As if to his character, the crown prince tried to leave right away after briefly reciting his opening speech briefly. But one table grabbed his ankle. Your Highness, I have a question. I glared furiously at him because I thought some bastards would dare catch the way to the crown prince. Marquis Ellen, long time no see. The late Marquis Ellen was the mother of the Empress. Still, it is possible that there would be an honor to those who were excluded from his maternal grandfather, but the crown prince openly bowed down. What's the question? Why didn't the Empress and the second prince participate in this hunting contest? Come to think of it, there was a seat for the royal family at the top of the podium, but only the crown prince was sitting there. A dangerous smile hung over the prince's mouth at the young question of the enemy of the late Marquis Ellen. The queen seems to be as ill as his majesty, seeing that there was no response in the invitation. She was fine when I saw her a while ago, and she suddenly feels sick? I don't know, she must hate to see myself hosting a hunting competition, so I guess she is sick. Callisto shrugged his shoulders and cocked his head nonchalant. The day of the Marquis of Ellen was quickly solidified. Well then, where is Prince 2? My only brother who went to South during the hunting competition is likely to miss him, he said, and sent him along with crying. A young child who is complaining about not wanting to fall should be around his parents. Isn't it? The prince was of an age when even empty words could not be called a child. I knew it instinctively. The crown prince repaid the humiliation of the second prince's birthday party. That's right. Then a loud laugh burst out from one side. They were families who attended the war in support of the crown prince. The prince, who laid down the silence in front of all the people of other countries, was a complete predator. Originally, the imperial fight is as fierce as a dog fight, but this is a love simulation game. Besides, these scenes didn't come out very well. I felt so strange when I became one of the characters in the game and experienced it myself. It was the moment when I was staring up at him blankly. He suddenly moved his red eyes, and there was no escape from eye contact. I tried to snow in a hurry, but it was late. The corners of the mouth of the man who found me went up fishy. Favorability 3%. The crown prince's head twinkled. Its anxiety that was climbing slowly hit me all over. The crown prince, who was making eye contact with me for a moment, turned his head and looked at the Marquis of Ellen. I think I've given you a good answer, Marquis. The silent pressure not to get any better has reached this point. Yes, thank you, Your Highness. The late Marquis Ellen bowed her head with a face of great shame. Now that everything that was holding the crown prince's ankle was gone, I thought he was going to leave. No, I was eager to float, but I was supposed to just finish my opening speech. I changed my mind as if he had found a funny toy. His red eyes glistened. Let's keep the Eve to the end. Left X, right X, front, prince. I wanted to stop and crying. After finishing his opening speech, the crown prince descended from the podium. He seemed to be in chat with the aristocrats who supported him. But I couldn't help feeling that somehow he was steadily closing in on my side. Just in time, the Duke also left to greet the other nobles. Miss, are you feeling sick? Did I show too much anxiety? Emily asked with a worried look. I'm all right, I tried hard to answer back with a face that didn't bother her. Then I changed my words immediately. No, Emily, could you get me some water? The glass of water was empty because I was burning my stomach and drank water. I could have called a passing bell, but I was afraid that even the action would catch the prince's eye. I'll go ask if there's a chamomile tea, Emily whispered quietly. Chamomile was a soothing tea. She said that she would be my limb, and it seemed to me that she was really paying attention to my complexion. I'd appreciate that. I nodded, dressed faintly. A corner of my heart warmed up. It was not long after Emily left the banquet hall. Leonard suddenly rose from his seat. Where are you going? I grabbed his sleeve without realizing it. He frowned down on my hand. Say hello to friends. Do you have to go? If you're just with me, are you crazy? He freaked out and pulled the book from my sleeve and left the table at high speed. Favorability 22%. The distance glistened above his head. The favorability that had fallen slightly earlier rose again, but I was not happy at all. This resulted in the disappearance of 2 shields. My anxiety was heightened. Now you're the only one. I turned to the right with an earnest face. Derek was the only one left on the table. But while I was holding on to Leonard, he had already been all set to leave with someone. So I'd like to talk to you about the business we've been working on the other day. All the members who gathered at that time were also present. That's right. Derek followed the man he was greeting and went away without looking back or turning back. No, please don't leave me. Unlike Leonard, he didn't even have time to catch. I was left alone on the table. In an instant, all the useful shields are gone, and I'm exposed to death. Looking around, everyone was gathering in 2s and 3s to make friends. No one but the Crown Prince was coming to me. What do I do? It was when I was looking around with a vague face. Suddenly there was something that caught my eye. It was a group of women dressed in a unique style, not in the usual dress format for aristocratic spirits. Some people were dressed in sexy clothes that seemed to show their insides, while others were covered with dark cloth from head to toe, revealing only their eyes. On the other side there were also women in costumes with an oriental feel. It was royalty and aristocrats from other countries, to be exact, a country that lost the war and became a subordinate state. Then one of the women dressed in black pulled out a white ball as big as a soccer ball from a small cage. What's that? It was as opaque and smooth as a puffy bubble gum, with large eyes covering half of its face. Moreover, it was a strange-looking bird with no hands and thin legs like a chicken. They said they'd release animals from other countries for hunting. Is it one of them? It was a strange creature that I had never seen before, but it looked very cute to walk around. The cry of the strange creature escaped through the dainty fangs that protruded out of its mouth. How cute! I felt that I was the only one who thought so, and the eyes of other children were slightly drawn to it. It was that moment. Main quest. Let's be the queen of hunting offers. First, save the neighbors from danger. You will proceed with the quest. Compensation: all male protagonists. Favorability plus 5%. Fame plus 50. Accept, reject. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe. Click the bell icon for notifications.